Hey everyone, Happy New Year. I hope you had some lovely celebrations or a good night at home if you choose to spend it that way. Today I thought we could try something a little different that I think is quite fitting for beginnings, so for the start of this year. This is a book called How to Be an Explorer of the World. And it reminded me a little bit of when I started watching ASMR. I was going through some rough times back then. And one thing that really helped me was to sort of focus on my senses and the world that surrounded me. Just like ASMR allows us to really focus on the moment and on the things we hear and see, and invite some relaxation into our lives. So, and I think this portable life museum, as it's called, kind of has a similar approach. Just something that you can use in your everyday life when you walk around. So, it says this book started with a list that I wrote one night when I couldn't sleep. How to be an explorer of the world. Let's have a look through this. Number 1, it says always be looking. Notice the ground beneath your feet. Number 2, consider everything alive and animate. And number 3, everything is interesting. Look closer. Then it tells you to alter your course often, to observe for both long and short durations, and to notice the stories going on around you through patterns or connections. You can document them. And ultimately it allows you to create a personal dialogue with your environment, where you can maybe trace things back to their origins. And you can use all of your senses. I think that's the really important part. Then it says, after reading this list a few times, it occurred to me that artists and scientists analyze the world around them in surprisingly similar ways. You observe, collect, analyze, compare, and notice patterns. Your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to document and observe the world around you as if you've never seen it before. Take notes. Collect things you find on your travels. Document your findings. Notice patterns. Copy, trace. Focus on one thing at a time and record what you are drawn to. So it's a little like you're an ethnographer of your own world, which is the documentation and analysis of a particular culture through field research. It's going to be your own culture or your own life that you're exploring. You won't really need anything. It says you can use this book, but all of your most important tools exist in your body. And this book specifically invites you to collect things and to create a little exhibition, maybe, if you feel like it. It says here, the Indo-European root of the word art is to arrange or fit together, to join things. In this slide, art can be pared down to its most simplistic form. We begin by collecting, then playing with the materials or objects, organizing them in a variety of ways, making new combinations, trying things, then observing the arrangements we have made. So, personally, I don't really feel like collecting, as it suggests in here. But I do like the idea of logging experiences and observations. So you don't necessarily have to take things home. It says collect items you fancy and that for different reasons attract your attention. And I think items don't necessarily have to be objects. Remember also to collect and study things that seem for the moment to be meaningless or irrelevant. The twists and turns of the creative process lead you back to an important encounter that at first seemed quite neutral or even something that made you feel repelled or exasperated. So by exploring our world, we can add depth to it. It's not necessarily neutral anymore, but there are layers. It becomes more interesting. So the question is, how do we do that? We have different methods of investigation. Our perception of things can be altered simply by the angle we choose to look at something. Specifically, here we have a little list of how exactly we can investigate things. This can be sight, sound, smell, touch and taste, so our 5 senses. But we can also observe movement, shape and texture. We can look at function, at symbols and language, both definitions and words. We can look subjectively or objectively, in comparison or contrast. We can have a look at negative space. We can look symmetrically at colors and parts, anecdotally, that is as a story, historically, artistically or scientifically, morally. We can have a look across time or just at one point in time, at metaphysics or context, at culture and politics, at rituals, aesthetics, micro, macro, in multiple. You can see things on their own, in 2D and 3D, abstractedly, mythically, directionally or linearly, as a habit, as a device, lightheartedly, or as a sign. So many different ways in which you can investigate. You might want to carry some tools with you, but this is entirely optional. Maybe a camera for photos, but of course you can do that on your phone. You could maybe also take a Polaroid camera that immediately prints your photos. You can also record audio on videos. You might use some non-drying modeling clay, some tweezers or a magnifying glass, some gloves just to make sure, some tape, a pocket knife, a date stamp and pad, some kind of bag is definitely a good idea. Labels, pencil, pen, and a field book for taking notes. And then once you start collecting, you will need some Ziploc bags, some envelopes, boxes, a journal, little containers, glass jars, a file folder, tactile boards, and hangings. But again, this is entirely optional. But when I was reading through it, what it reminded me of was sort of these magazines for kids that explain to you how to be a detective and all the things that you're going to need to be a good detective. I thought it was quite funny. And then I came to this page here. And in fact it says, exploring the world around you really can be a bit of an archaeological dig into your own childhood. It can relate to your childhood or inspire memories. And you might even recreate objects from your childhood using found objects or readily available materials such as cardboard, glue, string, tape, leaves, wood or rocks. You may choose to recreate your childhood room on a miniature scale using found materials. So I'm not that kind of creative to do that, but I think it's a cute idea. The thing that really spoke to me was this page. So here we are already with the explorations. They are numbered through. This is number 7. One suggestion is to collect paint chips from a paint or hardware store. Find colors you respond to in the world. Attempt to match them using the chips. You can also match the colors using a portable paint set. Make notes of where you saw the colors. And an alternate would be to document colors from your favorite books, your dreams, or your memories. And you probably already know that the way colors are named is one of my favorite things in the world. These here are printed in black and white, sadly, but we can sort of guess what these colors are. There's Blue Springs for my favorite bowl, Sterling for the house on the corner. There's Olive Tree for the dried moss in the woods, Grassy Meadows for a found tennis ball. You are my sunshine for Nana's house, and here's a 4-leaf clover for my scarf. There's Calypso Blue and Jasper Opal. There's Corn Husk, Florida Pink, Ladybug Red, which we have right here. Or Golden Vista for the sunsets. This is an idea I really like. So you might explore the patterns when you walk around, like the cracks in the pavements. You might try to notice things that you haven't noticed before. One exercise in doing so is to write down 50 things, or to document 50 things about one of the following: a trip to the library, a trip to the grocery store, or walk in your neighborhood. So, something that feels very ordinary, things you've probably done 100 times, places you've visited countless times. But there's always something new that you can notice. Before familiarity can turn into awareness, the familiar must be stripped of its inconspicuousness. We must give up assuming that the object in question needs no explanation. However frequently recurrent, modest, vulgar it may be, it will now be labeled as something unusual, something worth noticing, something worth seeing. On your walks, this might be type, or the different kinds of letterings that you can see in a city. You might notice structures, parts that other people ignore, like ceilings, bathrooms, corners, closets, the inside of drawers. Pay attention to the hidden places or document the corners of your home. Here's a prompt I really like too. It's about small thoughts. Make a list of placid small thoughts you have throughout the week. For instance, what were you thinking just now? You might also document your favorite street by mapping it out on a piece of paper, then describing everything in detail. The shops, the houses, the street signs, the trees. You might practice becoming Leonard Cohen by sketching or documenting things that you use in your daily routine. Leonard Cohen did this regularly as a form of meditative practice, and he said, "I've always loved things, just things in the world. I love trying to find the shape of things." I like Leonard Cohen very, very much. We have plenty of other suggestions here. And of course we said there are other senses too that you might want to use, like found smells. You go for a walk, you make a list of all the smells in your neighborhood, be as detailed as possible and attempt to identify sources. And the same of course is true for found sounds or overheard conversations. If you live in a more rural environment, you might explore the language of trees by collecting as many parts of trees as you can, by using things that have fallen naturally. You don't want to harm the trees. Then arrange your collection, play with it, hang it, study the shapes, the drawings, hang things from branches. Celebrate trees. And if you want to transform an everyday experience, you can add music with headphones. Or you can see everything as a film. You are a filmmaker, everything is a source. Make a movie with your eyes. Or pretend you're someone else. What would this other person do? Invoke your imagination. Pretend you're on a secret mission. Go into character. Perceive inanimate objects as real. Wear a costume or disguise. Attempt to see things from as many angles as possible and alter your habitual routine. Take a different route than you normally would. I also like to imagine to be in a different time. What did things look like 20 years ago, 50 years ago? Can I maybe find a route that really reminds me of that? Well, if we do want to do that, to explore our world, it's also important to occasionally get a little lost. All you need for that is to pick a day and time and then pack a bag with your wallet, a journal, a pen, a little snack, and maybe this book. And then you start heading in any direction. Act only on instinct. Do the opposite of what you think you should do. And if you start to think you're wasting your time, then you're doing it correctly. Keep going. Pay attention to the details. Lose all sense of time and place. And I really like this idea of getting lost and that it's important. So let's read for this part here. It starts off with a quote. The closer man gets to the unknown, the more inventive he becomes, the quicker he adopts new ways. To enter into the unknown or to partake in an experiment involves a willingness to fully experience and study things we don't understand and to embrace that lack of understanding. There are different ways of getting lost. There's the literal lost, as in being lost in the woods and able to find your way back to the starting point. Or there are metaphorical examples of being lost. Lost in one's head, lost soul, lost in time. In the context of exploring, we can think of it in terms of existing in a state where you do not know exactly where you are headed. In this sense, we may choose to become either literally lost, exploring a place we've never been before, or lost in the sense that we enter into a relationship with objects and ideas without knowing what the outcome will be. And I'd just like to get out a different book quickly that we've had a look at before. This is a field guide to getting lost, and I figured this fits perfectly today. So it says here that the author was presented with a quote at some point that kind of stuck with her. And I didn't write it down. Oh, right, here it is. So, the quote is, "How will you go about finding that thing, the nature of which is totally unknown to you?" And she writes, "That thing, the nature of which is totally unknown to you, is usually what you need to find, and finding it is a matter of getting lost." The word lost comes from the Old Norse los, meaning the disbanding of an army, and this origin suggests soldiers falling out of formation to go home, a truce with the wide world. I worry now that many people never disband their armies, never go beyond what they know. Advertising, alarmist news, technology, incessant busyness, and the design of public and private space conspire to make it so. A recent article about the return of wildlife to suburbia described snow-covered yards in which the footprints of animals are abundant and those of children are entirely absent. As far as the animals are concerned, the suburbs are an abandoned landscape, and so they roam with confidence. But these children seldom roam, even in the safest places. But for her, childhood roaming was what developed self-reliance, a sense of direction and adventure, imagination, a will to explore, to be able to get a little lost and then figure out the way back. I also really like the thought here in this paragraph. She picks up what we've seen here, that lost has two meanings. Losing things is about the familiar falling away. Getting lost is about the unfamiliar appearing. There are objects and people that disappear from your sight or knowledge or possession. You lose a bracelet, a friend, the key. You still know where you are. Everything is familiar except there is one item less, one missing element. Or you get lost, in which case the world has become larger than your knowledge of it. Either way, there is a loss of control. Imagine yourself streaming through time, shedding gloves, umbrellas, wrenches, books, friends, homes, names. This is what the view looks like if you take a rear-facing seat on the train. Looking forward, you constantly acquire moments of arrival, moments of realization, moments of discovery. The wind blows your hair back and you are greeted by what you have never seen before. The material falls away in onrushing experience. It peels off like skin from a molting snake. Of course, to forget the past is to lose the sense of loss that is also a memory of an absent richness and a set of clues to navigate the present by. The art is not one of forgetting, but letting go. And when everything else is gone, you can be rich in loss. That being said, getting lost in your own city can be quite difficult at times. But maybe these little notes for some field work can help. So, in order to be able to document your experiences and your found objects, we have an object documentation log. You can note your object, the dimensions, the material, the inventory date and the location where you found it, with a visual description of some sketches, potential categories, additional notes, and the fieldworker's initials. For the experience documentation log, you might want to add date, time, location, and subject or event. And additionally to the visual description or sketches, you can add colors, textures, smells, shapes, and materials. And any potential additional notes. So we have a couple of these. Then here we have research notes for you to connect the dots. We can create a storage pocket. You cut along the dotted lines. And you cut out here. You tape this page to the next on all three sides, and then you can place the items inside here. So you have a little pocket in here. You can glue down found objects if you feel like it. And here you can create an experience collection. Date, description, and location. You can write down overheard conversations and add some more research notes. You can also list your found colors, smells, sounds, tastes, and textures. You can add some tags to your found objects. Plenty of space for your experiences. And in the end, maybe you even feel like setting up a showing for your experience and found object museum. Some ideas for display methods, and even on how to send out your invitations and set up your labels for the show. Right, and here's the glossary and the bibliography. I think it's a really cute book with some, inspirational ideas on how to walk through your life now for the new year and to allow some magic and wonder into what can feel quite ordinary, especially if we walk the same ways over and over again. Alright, so that was something a little different, but I hope you enjoyed it. And maybe you can use one or the other idea for yourself. I'll see you again next week with a map. So for now, thank you for watching and sleep well.